Go for questions before answers. Hey, it's Marek. I have a checklist. I have a 7-point checklist that I apply to every newsletter post that I write, and I write weekly. And occasionally I decide to upload my writing together with the checklist to Claude. And then I ask Claude, hey, Claude, can you go through the checklist and tell me whether I've forgotten anything or not? The checklist includes things like having a hook in the article, maybe some geeky or stealth humor, and maybe some visual, some scene that I want to open that particular newsletter with, and so on and so on. So once I've done it was a few weeks ago, and Claude said, no, the piece is not ready. All right, I uploaded it again, the same prompt, the same text, the same checklist, and Claude said, yep, ship it. It's a great piece of writing. So that was obviously surprising because I had the very same document, the very same prompt, the very same checklist uploaded to the very same chatbot twice, and I had two completely opposite responses. Now, plot twist is both of these responses were correct. And that's what I'm going to talk about in today's podcast. What happened is Claude made some assumptions about what I meant by some of the points in my checklist. I ended up publishing that particular piece of text. I didn't really pay too much attention to those judgments by Claude, whether they were positive or negative. And the post did very, very well. What I refer to now when I talk about the particular behavior that I just described to you is the precise misread, the precise misread. What happens is that in the process of analyzing my prompt and in the process of analyzing my checklist, Claude made some very, very specific decisions when it comes to the meaning of those points in the checklist specifically. What was having a visual opening meaning? What was the meaning of having a visual opening in the text? So what did it mean to have a hook in the article? And in one instance, the interpretation of that was different than the interpretation in the other instance. Claude got the wrong thing precisely right in at least one of those two cases. And interestingly, it's been recently shown in research at a much higher scale. There's a very, very recent podcast by University of Texas at Dallas researchers, and I'll drop more information about this research in the notes of the podcast. The title of the research paper is Non-Standard Errors in AI Agents. Researchers doing that particular study launched 150 AI agents and got them to analyze some very, very specific financial data. And they were asking whether a financial volume of transactions went up or down in a particular period. And out of those 150 bots, they split into two groups. 90 of those bots gave one response. The other 60 gave a completely opposite response. One group said that the trading volume, that was the question specifically, asking about a trading volume. One of them said that the trading volume grew by 6%. The other group said that the trading volume declined by 5%. It was really interesting. There was not a random distribution of responses, but literally two groups. Within those two groups, the differences in responses were minimal, negligible. One said grew 6%, the other said declined 5%. What happened is that one group interpreted the question about trading volume as trading volume in dollars. The other group of bots interpreted the term or the phrase trading volume as the volume of shares traded, those financial data that those bots were analyzing. So dollars versus the volume or number of shares being traded. And of course, if the prices of shares change, then those two outputs will start to diverge, right? You could sell more shares, but if their value drops, then the volume in dollars will be potentially dropping as well, right? So that's the point here. And that's how we end up with one group saying they grew by 6%, the volume grew by 6%, the other saying that the volume declined by 5%. The misinterpretation happened before the work even started. There was zero room for interpretation, and that's why we ended up with this type of results, right? With two groups of results. It's literally like two consultants sitting in one room and arguing about their outcomes being very, very different, but they don't really realize that they've just made some very different assumptions. So, you could say, all right, how do I avoid that? Maybe I should be more precise with my prompts, right? But it's a bit of a catch-22, because the moment you have to become more precise and tell those chatbots exactly what they should be doing, perhaps you don't need those chatbots in the first place. You don't need to have this sort of additional expertise in the form of a chatbot if you already have it in your own head. It reminds me of a conversation I had about a week ago or less than a week ago with a CEO of a large financial organization. And he said, Marek, when I work with chatbots, I like my prompts to be very, very short, to the point that they're ambiguous. And I said, you know what? That's actually a good approach, because if you want to explore, if you're looking for maybe alternative interpretations of what you're thinking about, if you're open to that, short, ambiguous prompts might be a good idea. But if you're looking for precision, that's not a good idea. If you're looking for precision, you need to have more detailed prompts. So how do we deal with this, right? What do we do? How do we solve it? I just said that it's sort of pointless to have more precise, longer prompts, because it's like, you being an expert and there's no point in working with a chatbot. Am I contradicting myself? Well, not really. There is another approach, and that other approach is to make sure that you're not coming to those chatbots just for answers, but you're coming to those chatbots for questions. Get them to ask you questions. Give them a task and say, is there anything unclear in what I'm asking you to do? What else do you need to know before making a decision? Most chatbots do not ask clarifying questions. A great majority of them do not. So you have to force them into that mode. Go for questions before answers. In the newsletter that I wrote about it, I gave two very, very specific pieces of advice. One was to prompt for questions, which I just described. Ask what else do you need to know before answering the question that I have or doing whatever I'm asking you to do. The other one is to look for forks. Forks are those points in the decision-making process where the chatbot makes a decision, makes some interpretation. And this is exactly what we saw in the study by the UT Dallas researchers. Those bots ended up with a fork. There was a decision, share value, or dollar value when it comes to calculating the volume that they were calculating. And so look for those forks. How do you do it? Well, ask the very same prompt or send the very same prompt multiple times. Maybe you don't have to do it 150 times, but do it 5 times, maybe 10 times. These days, those chatbots that we work with are so fast and so cost-effective that it doesn't really cost us much to repeat the same prompt a number of times, and then look for moments where answers split. These are your forks. Try to understand why those forks happen, because these are the places where you need to step in and clarify the interpretation of your prompts. So that's it for today. That's it for this week. Remember, whenever you're dealing with chatbots and you're giving them a very, very complex prompt, a very, very complex task that you need to make sure that they're getting it right, use those two principles. Prompt for questions and also have multiple approaches to the very same prompt, and then look for forks. Now, As we're closing this particular podcast, I wanted to give a shout out to my two children. My daughter Zofia has been editing those podcasts for a while now, definitely more than several weeks. So massive shout out to Zofia. And as of this week, my son Filip is joining the production team as well. He's now making music for the podcast. So family operations. Prompt multiple times. Look for forks, get questions before answers, and stay curious.